we got a motion and a second already? We did. All right, it's time to vote. All in favor say aye. Okay. Senator T, you recognize speaking yes.
Mr. Chairman, I won't speak long, but I do think that this proposal calls for all the money going to tax reduction. And I don't think that's responsible as we move forward to automatically say we're going to spend it all on tax reduction. I think the right thing to do is spend some of it into our surplus fund. We need to build that up, keep bondholders happy, whatever, for whatever reason, and really just for good business to have a surplus in our account. So I'm not opposed to tax reduction with some of these dollars, but I don't think it makes sense to obligate right here and now all those dollars for tax reduction. So I would ask you to vote against this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Senator Elliott, you recognize?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to inquire of the maker of the motion, and is it consistent with the process that if this motion were to indicate such so that we could carry out, I think, the substance of the motion, but without determining not only not spending it before we get it, but not designating where it should go if we get it, because we don't know what circumstance is going to be. So that's a question I pose, I guess, to the chair or to the maker of the motion, whoever is going to give an answer.
Senator Dotson, would you like to respond to that? I can't, I'm sorry, Representative Dotson.
I'm not related to that now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the proposal is concerned, I'm supportive of this primarily in the overall goal of what we're doing here is to lower the burden of taxes on Arkansas residents. And so the totality of this task force, as I understand its goal, is to make our tax code more fair across the entire board. That's what we spent months doing, looking at primarily with the focus, it seems like, on income tax reduction. So as we're looking at all of these different things to make Arkansas code flatter, fair across the board, more streamlined for everybody, this would go into that overall goal of reducing taxes. So we have a net tax reduction coming out of this task force, or at least a net neutral on everything across the board in its overall goal. So if we're looking at cutting $180 million of income tax cuts or more, this would be a component of that. And so this should all go toward the net goal of reducing overall taxes.
But are you assuming, though, that we can be predictive here and now that all of this money, for example, is going to be needed to meet the goal? And isn't there a bit of a fallacy in our, well, that's probably put it, determining what the cut is going to be and having everything going to the cut, even something unanticipated, in our effort to reach our goal? Why would it not make sense then that when we are writing bills that we wouldn't decide with this one, just like everything else, just what we're going to do with the funding? I'm not following why we couldn't make that decision then, rather than saying right now everything has to go to the tax cut.
Okay, and again, let me just encourage members to do this. A couple of things. One is remember that if this does pass, there'll be a bill that will debate. You have the opportunity, if you would like to make a substitute motion to do something different, to do that. But let's continue to focus on right now the motion that is before us is to proceed with collection and at some point dedicated towards tax relief. So let's dispose of that unless there's a substitute motion and move on. Do you have anything else, Senator Elliott?
Well, I'll make a substitute motion.
Okay, what's your motion?
I move that we pass this item without having all the funds designated to any cause.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Now, I've got several on the queue here, so I'm going to go ahead and go through this and And now we're going to address the substitute motion, which is to not designate the funds for anything, but to collect the tax. Is that fair? Okay. Senator Ingram, you're right.
I think it's important, and we're going to, first off, I never knew the charge of this tax task force was to cut $180 million. That was something that escaped me. Secondly, we are going to get involved up in tremendous discussions here about if everything is going to be tied to a tax cut for this or that. I thought we were looking at long-term policy, and maybe we need some clarification from the chair that, as a matter of policy that could be completed over 8 or 10 years to get to a certain point in fairness of the tax code and addressing sales exemptions versus directing them out of this committee. I don't feel comfortable voting on something that could come back to me in the session that I opposed, and they said, well, you voted for it at the committee, now you're going to vote against it on the floor of the Senate. I don't think that's the way to operate. I thought we were trying to take a look at our tax code and make it competitive, make it fair, and that was the charge of this committee. But to tie everything to a certain tax relief for that, I think we're going to be hamstrung, and we'll never get this report out of here, or maybe it will over the objection of a minority. But would the chairs maybe give us some direction as their thought about policy and where we hope to go versus voting on specific proposals that earmark tax cuts for things that you might philosophically agree with, but maybe don't agree that that's to go to a certain tax cut or a designation?
Well, I'll comment, and then I'll ask my co-chair if he'd like to comment. And Maddie just gave me a copy of the first page of the bill, which is in our books, and it talks about our charge, which is, it's really in the title. There's two things. One is reform, and the other is relief. And the $180 million, obviously, that's associated with one proposal, but as you know, we got two others we're looking at, one at 280 and one at 100 and 205 million or so. So it's not tied to any specific proposal, but it is tied to reform and relief. And again, Representative Dodson has basically said, and I think many have said, that when we close exemptions or when we find other revenue streams, it needs to be associated with the other charge, which is relief. That may not be the will of everybody. I understand that, and that's why we'll work through it. So I think this motion, both the motion and the substitute motion, both fall under the charge of the task force. And this is the time where we get to decide what the will of the majority of the task force is. And I certainly don't think we're going to have unanimity on all of these items. And there will be bills and there will be items that come out of this task force that are killed by the legislature, changed by the legislature, and that's the way the process works. So it's part of the process, certainly. And again, just as the substitute motion was allowed, we'll hear debate both sides. Do you want to add anything back?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ingram, I agree with a lot of what you're saying is, but we're pretty bad about hamstringing ourselves and tying it down. But the overall goal for this representative is for fairness, and I'll just tell you that I'm for tax cuts across the board. It didn't have to be done next year. This thing can be phased in. I agree with that. It's also going to depend on what the governor comes up with on transformation, how much savings. I think we've got to have a cut $1 for every dollar we reduce taxes? No, but it's got to be part of the equation. There has to be cuts in government. Now, am I big on this has to be tied to, it's all going in the same pot, general revenue? We're going to have to figure it out. We're going to have savings. We're going to have some additional revenue to lower the income tax. But I'm not, if we raise the internet tax to reduce the overall tax for the income tax, I'm okay with it. But the wording, I understand, but this is not a bill. And the bill that we address between September 1 and December on writing that is going to be real thing we'll vote on in January. So I would put your focus on that rather than what happens in here.
Senator,
Well, I mean, if we're looking at everything in totality, and looking at our overall budget and what we come out of here with cuts, then you know, that makes me a little more comfortable. But I've said for years that the internet tax is the only opportunity that the highway department is ever going to have in being able to try to find funding. I mean, we had to scramble around this year for the highway department. Now, we by the governor's own admission that, you know, we have, the last 10 years, we've had $200 million in surplus sales tax and or surplus revenue, and we were going to take 25% of it, and that was going to be help pay with our federal match. And that is not proved to be true. This year, we had to actually go through excess funds for DHS that were put in a rainy day fund. And this is an opportunity to designate that money to fix the roads. That doesn't mean we're not going to cut taxes overall in here with other things that we're going to find. But to designate this one item as sales tax reduction, to me, is short-sighted and looking at specifics instead of looking at totality of budget. So I appreciate the explanation from the chairs, and I appreciate you allowing me to ask the question.
absolutely. Senator Dismayne, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think, what seems to be lost on me is what we're talking about right now are revenues. You know, the ups and downs of revenue. So it may increase here, maybe a decrease somewhere else, and then we're going to have a bigger discussion based on whatever the outcome, the net change is when we conduct our budget. By the time we conduct that discussion on the budget, we're going to be listing our priorities, the revenue stabilization, and then additionally, some items, whether or not to be surplus or whatever that will attribute those funds to. So it may be reserved, it may be whatever, but I think I think the way that it's worded, I think it's the goal that there's going to be a net tax decrease, correct? And so it's pretty safe wording the way that it's worded right now, despite whatever your position may be, to leave that wording in case and really not get hung up in the weeds, because what we're trying to do is have a discussion about the budget. Should we have more money in reserve? Should we place a higher priority for highways? Should we whatever? Well, that's a secondary conversation once we determine what our revenues are, in my opinion. So if you read the way this is written, understanding, and I think everyone in this room understands that it's going to be a net or wash change in revenue, a net loss or a loss in revenue. I think we're just kind of beating this up for the sake of beating up the issue.
Okay, now to be clear, when you say read the way it's written, you're talking about the original motion. Okay, so we're
The original motion.
That's right. So right now, again, folks need to understand, the first vote we're going to have is on the substitute motion, which does not dedicate it. Correct, Senator Elliott?
That is correct.
So, again, we can speak a little bit about both, but just make sure how we're going to go through this so there's no confusion. Do you have anything else on it, Senator?
Yeah.
Let's Representative Dodson, do you have a comment on this?
Yes, I would like to speak against the substitute motion. As the proposal, the original proposal, the original motion, talked about reducing taxes as the overall goal of our entire task force here. I think this falls in line with that, and obviously I would like to vote on that. So I ask the members of the task force to vote down the substitute motion and make sure that this proposal goes as part of our overall recommendations to reducing taxes for the entire task force, which I think a motion was made earlier and adopted, if I recall, that any proposals that come out of our final recommendations would be at least a net reduction of overall taxes. I don't know where that, I don't have that one in front of me, but I think that's part of the motion that we adopted earlier as far as the task force.
Okay, Senator Elliott, you recognize?
I think the last two comments make it very clear why this motion is really needed, because on the one hand, I think my motion is consistent with what Senator Dismayne said, in that we don't want to get in the weeds, and that's the exact purpose of my motion. And what Dodson just said is is absolutely in the weeds. And I think even if we some of us think we should not make this decision now about what the designation is going to be, and some think we do. So I think this motion is right down the middle of our deciding, because even when you look at the wording for today, you know, it seems harmless, but if we go back to the original motion, I guess, now we're into a position of some of us think one thing and some of us think the other. I'd just like to clear it up that we are going to vote on this motion, I hope to say, we all want to collect the taxes and wait and have the discussion after we have the bills. That's what this motion would do. And we'd all be on the same page.
Okay, Representative Johnson, you recognize?
Thank you. I want to speak to the substitute motion, because I think when we're looking at further down the road, we're looking at income tax cuts. And that's going to come right out of the general fund. If we're cutting out of the general fund, well, put back in where we can to kind of keep it balanced and even. I don't think we need to designate anything at this point. And so I have to agree with the secondary motion.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
that's all we have in the queue right now. So it's time to vote on the substitute motion. So Sarah Elliott, would you push your button and restate your motion one more time? Okay.
I move passage of the item, is that item number, which one?
1B.
Uh,
Oh, I'm sorry, it's B.
Just B? Is that all? Okay, I move we vote on the item B without designation of the funds.
We have a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No. Call the roll. Chair's going to make a little terrible.
Aye. Senator Teague. Senator Ervin. Senator Disney. Senator Ingram. Senator Hester.
No.
Senator Wallace.
No.
Representative Dawson.
No.
Representative Jett. Representative Sabin. Representative Sabin. Representative Ferguson.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Pitch. Representative Pitch. Representative Kavanaugh. Representative Jean.
Okay, the motion failed, so now we're going to move to the primary motion. So, Representative Dotson, restate your motion.
I move adoption of the proposal as presented, as written.
Okay, and it's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it.
Roll call.
Okay, call the roll on that, please. Joyce, you second the roll call, right? We need a second hand if we're going to do roll call. Yeah, okay.
Senator Elliott.
No.
Senator Teague. Senator Ervin. Senator Disney.
Aye.
Senator Ingram. Senator Ingram.
No.
Senator Hester. Senator Hester.
Aye.
Senator Wallace.
Aye.
Representative Dotson.
Aye.
Representative Jett. Representative Sabin. Representative Sabin. Representative Ferguson. Representative Johnson. Representative Pitch. Representative Fitch. Representative Kavanaugh. Representative Jean.
Okay, motion passes. So we're going to move on. If you all look, now we're in the income tax exemption proposals. And again, I just remind everybody, we're going to see all this stuff again. Don't worry. Here in a couple months, you'll see a bill and we'll rehash it again. Okay, these three are already included in the final report, right, Joy?
That's correct.
These are motions that have already been adopted, and that's why when we talk about the income tax proposals, some of the items that were in Tax Foundation's report, like for instance, the throwback rule and the single sales tax apportionment, we've already adopted those as recommendations. And then the legislative review process to review exemptions on a regular schedule, which as you all recall, that's a recommendation we made a few months ago, and with the understanding that that will help us be more competitive when they evaluate states for their tax policy. So I don't really see any need to go through those, as those have already been adopted. We're going to go on down to the income tax proposal section. So the first one, Joy, is 1B. If you want to go ahead. Hang on a second.